The city exhaled a plume of cold, damp air as evening settled over the rain-slicked streets. Headlights from a river of black cars bled across the pavement, reflecting in the large glass windows of Aria, a restaurant where the clinking of wine glasses was a language all its own. Inside, Julian Croft sat alone at a table draped in white linen, the ghost of a multi-million-dollar deal still hanging in the air around him. He had won, as he always did, but the victory felt as hollow as the polite laughter that had filled the boardroom an hour earlier. He was a man who commanded empires from a glass tower, yet he was profoundly, achingly lonely. He signaled for the check, leaving a stack of bills that could have paid someone's rent for a month, and took the leather-bound folder of leftovers from the waiter without a word. Outside, the rain was a fine, persistent mist. As he walked the few steps toward his waiting town car, a figure emerged from the shadows of a nearby alley. It was a woman, her frame made smaller by the oversized, threadbare coat she wore. Her blonde hair was plastered to her skin by the rain, and her face was pale, etched with a desperation that cut through the city's indifferent facade. In her arms, she cradled a small, sleeping child, wrapped in the thin fabric of her own coat to shield him from the cold. She stepped into Julian's path, not with aggression, but with a quiet, heartbreaking plea. "Please, sir," she began, her voice barely a whisper, a fragile sound against the city's hum. She didn't look at his watch or his suit. Her eyes were fixed on the folder in his hand. "Not money, just the food. My son, he hasn't eaten all day." Julian stopped. This was not an unusual occurrence in his life. He was a target for requests, for pleas, for hands reaching out for a piece of his fortune. His usual response was a curt dismissal, a signal to his driver, a swift and silent retreat into the tinted safety of his car. He reached instinctively for his wallet, ready to deploy the crisp bills that served as his shield against the world's untidy problems. He would give her money, more than enough, and she would disappear. But then, he made the mistake of looking at her, really looking at her. He saw past the rain and the poverty and into her eyes. And in that moment, the entire world stopped turning. They were a startling, familiar shade of deep violet blue, filled not with the hardness of the streets, but with a fierce, protective light and an ocean of sorrow. He had seen those eyes before. In another life, under another sky. They had looked at him with kindness from across a dusty playground in a forgotten foster home. They had belonged to his only friend, the one person who had ever made him feel seen. The one person he had lost. The wallet in his hand was forgotten. The rain, the city, the waiting car, it all dissolved. His voice was a choked whisper, a name he hadn't spoken aloud in 20 years. Anna. The woman, Isabel, flinched at the name, her expression clouding with confusion and a fresh wave of pain. "No," she said softly. "That was my sister." Julian felt the ground shift beneath his feet. His carefully constructed world, his empire of logic and control, fractured into a million pieces. His whole life hadn't just changed. It had been a lie he told himself to survive the memory of those eyes. And now, here they were, looking back at him from the face of a stranger, holding a child and begging for his leftovers. Isabel recoiled slightly, pulling her sleeping son, Leo, closer to her chest. The man's reaction was not what she'd expected. His face, once a mask of detached indifference, was now a canvas of raw, undisguised shock. The name he had whispered, her sister's name, echoed in the space between them like a phantom. How did you know her?" Isabel asked, her voice trembling, a mix of fear and a desperate, long-dormant hope. Julian couldn't seem to find his voice. He just stared at her, at the ghost of his past standing before him in the rain. His driver, seeing the prolonged interaction, stepped out of the car with a large black umbrella, but Julian waved him off with a sharp, dismissive gesture. He took a step closer to Isabel, his eyes never leaving hers. "Anna and I, we grew up together," he said, his voice rough with emotion. "At the Elmwood home. She was my best friend." The name of the foster home was like a key unlocking a painful, dusty room in Isabel's memory. Anna had spoken of a boy, a quiet, intense boy named Julian who she'd looked out for. The boy who'd had no one else. Isabel looked at the powerful, impeccably dressed man before her, and for the first time, saw a flicker of the lost boy her sister had described. You're that Julian?" she breathed. He nodded, a wave of grief and something akin to wonder washing over his features. "I'm so sorry," he said, the words inadequate for the chasm of years and tragedy that separated them. "I heard about the fire. I tried to find you afterwards," but his voice trailed off. He didn't need to finish. After the fire that had taken Anna's life, Isabel, then just a child herself, had been lost in the system, bounced from one indifferent relative to another. She had become untraceable. "Get in the car," Julian said, his tone shifting from shock to a sudden, fierce urgency. It wasn't a request. It was a command born of 2 decades of guilt. "Both of you." Isabel hesitated, her ingrained distrust of easy solutions warring with the exhaustion that permeated her bones. But the sincerity in his eyes was undeniable. She allowed him to lead her to the car, settling into the plush leather seats that felt like another world. He didn't take her to a shelter. Instead, they drove to a discreet, luxury hotel where he kept a permanent suite. Inside, the room was warm and quiet. He ordered a feast from room service and watched in silence as she gently woke Leo and encouraged him to eat. The little boy, shy and overwhelmed, ate slowly, his wide, violet blue eyes, so like his mother's, so like his aunt's, darting around the opulent room. While Leo was distracted by a warm bowl of soup, Julian finally spoke of the past. He told her about Anna's kindness, about how her belief in him had been the one thing that propelled him forward after he aged out of the system. He spoke of the guilt that had haunted him, the feeling that he should have been there, that he should have been able to save her. Isabel listened, tears tracking silently down her cheeks. She shared her own story of struggle, of becoming a single mother, of a world that had offered her nothing but closed doors after her sister, her only family, was gone. When the stories were done, a new, fragile understanding existed between them. He saw her not as a beggar on the street, but as the last living link to the only person who had ever shown him unconditional love. And she saw him not as a rich man in a suit, but as the boy her sister had cared for, now a man wrestling with his own ghosts. He offered her a check, a number with so many zeros it seemed unreal. "Let me take care of you," he pleaded. "It's what Anna would want." But Isabel pushed it back. Her pride, though battered, was still intact. "I appreciate it, Julian, more than you know," she said, her voice regaining its quiet strength. "But I can't be a charity case. I need to stand on my own. I just need a chance." Julian looked at her, at the fierce independence shining in her tear-filled eyes, and he felt a surge of profound admiration. She was just like her sister, resilient, proud, and unwilling to be saved. He knew then that simply giving her money would be an insult to her spirit and to Anna's memory. He had to offer her something else, something more. Something that wasn't a handout, but a hand up. Julian spent the next few days in a state of focused intensity. He wasn't just a man moved by a chance encounter. He was a man on a mission, driven by a powerful cocktail of guilt, gratitude, and a burgeoning sense of responsibility. He learned every detail of Isabel's life. He saw the eviction notices, the mountain of medical bills from Leo's last bout of bronchitis, the stark reality of a life lived on the knife's edge of poverty. And he saw her resilience. He learned of the odd jobs she worked, the community college courses she took at night, the unwavering devotion she had for her son. His respect for her grew with every new piece of information. He knew his offer had to be perfect. It had to be something she couldn't refuse, not because it was generous, but because it was meaningful. He remembered Anna's dream. She had always wanted to run a small community center, a safe haven for kids like them. It was a dream they had whispered about in the dark of their dormitory at the foster home. The idea took root in Julian's mind and grew with astonishing speed. He already had a charitable foundation, a tax shelter his accountants had set up years ago, which he had largely ignored. Now, it had a purpose. He renamed it the Anna Project. He bought a building, a neglected but beautiful old brownstone in a neighborhood that needed it, and he poured his resources into renovating it. Then, he called Isabel. He didn't summon her to his office. He asked to meet her at a small, neutral cafe. When she arrived, looking wary but composed, he didn't offer platitudes or apologies. He laid a blueprint and a mission statement on the table between them. "This is the Anna Project," he said simply. "Its mission is to provide resources, support, and a safe space for single mothers and at-risk children. But it's just a building and a bank account right now. It needs a heart." It needs someone who understands what these families are going through, someone who can connect with them on a human level. He looked at her directly. It needs you, Isabel. I'm not offering you charity. I'm offering you a job. Director of Community Outreach. A real salary, real responsibilities. You would be helping people just like you, honoring your sister's memory in the process. Isabel was stunned into silence. She stared at the plans, at her sister's name written in elegant script on the mission statement. It wasn't a handout. It was a purpose. It was a chance to turn her own pain and struggle into a source of strength for others. It was a lifeline that felt like a calling. She looked up at him, her violet blue eyes shining with a complex mix of emotions. For the first time in a very long time, she saw a future that wasn't just about survival. Yes, she said, her voice quiet but firm. I'll do it. And so, Isabel stepped into Julian's world, not as a recipient of his charity, but as a partner in his mission. She moved into a modest but clean apartment provided by the foundation, and she poured her heart and soul into her new role. She was brilliant at it. Her empathy, born from her own experiences, allowed her to connect with the families they served in a way that no professionally trained social worker ever could. She wasn't just managing programs. She was building a community. Julian watched her transformation with a sense of awe. She was no longer the desperate woman in the rain, but a confident, capable leader. His admiration for her deepened into something more profound, something that felt dangerously close to love. The foundation became their shared space, the place where their two worlds met and began to merge. And in the middle of it all was Leo, a bright, happy little boy who was slowly, cautiously, beginning to see the quiet, sad man who visited his mom at work as something more than just a boss. The Anna Project flourished under Isabel's guidance. The old brownstone, once a symbol of urban decay, was now a vibrant hub of hope. Its rooms were filled with the sounds of children's laughter, the murmur of support group meetings, and the scent of coffee and shared meals. Isabel was the center of it all, a calm, compassionate force who knew every family story, every child's name. Julian found himself spending more and more time there, shedding his corporate skin the moment he walked through the doors. He wasn't CEO Julian Croft here. He was just Julian, the guy who was surprisingly good at fixing broken toys and surprisingly bad at finger painting. He and Isabel developed an easy rhythm, a partnership built on mutual respect and a shared purpose. The professional lines began to blur into a deep, personal connection. The catalyst, as always, was Leo. The little boy adored Julian. He saw none of the billionaire titan, only the man who would sit on the floor for hours, helping him build elaborate Lego castles. The man who listened with rapt attention to his detailed explanations about dinosaurs. For Julian, who had never known a real family, the affection of this small, trusting child was a revelation. It began to heal wounds he didn't even know he had. He started to see a future he had never dared to imagine, one that included a messy, joyful, love-filled home. But their fragile, burgeoning world was not immune to the harsh realities of Julian's life. The antagonist arrived in the form of Mr. Davenport, the chairman of Julian's board of directors. Davenport was a man of the old guard, a shrewd, ruthless businessman who viewed the world in terms of profit and loss, assets and liabilities. He saw the Anna Project as a sentimental and potentially risky distraction for his star CEO. He saw Isabel as a liability. He did some digging and uncovered the story of their first meeting, the begging, the homelessness. He saw it not as a story of resilience, but as a potential PR nightmare. He confronted Julian in his sterile, 50th floor office. "This is a mistake, Julian," he said, his voice cold and sharp. "This woman, she's a sob story, an emotional entanglement. She's making you soft. A scandal waiting to happen that could damage the reputation of this company and the credibility of your own foundation." Julian's reaction was swift and furious. He defended Isabel with a passion that surprised even himself. But Davenport was skilled at planting seeds of doubt. "Think about the optics, Julian," he warned. "How will it look to our investors when they find out the director of your charity was a homeless person you picked up off the street?" Unfortunately, Isabel was walking past the conference room on her way to drop off a report and overheard the last, venomous part of Davenport's tirade. The words hit her like a physical blow. "A homeless person you picked up off the street." All her deepest fears and insecurities came rushing back. She wasn't a director. She was a project, a charity case. She was tainting not only Julian's reputation, but her sister's memory. The shame was suffocating. That evening, she didn't wait for Julian to come home. She packed a small bag for herself and Leo, and she wrote a letter. Her hands trembled as she wrote, the words blurring through her tears. She thanked him for the opportunity, for his kindness, but she explained that she couldn't be the ghost that haunted his life or the scandal that ruined it. She was leaving, not just the job, but the city. It was the only way to protect him, to honor Anna. She left the letter on the kitchen counter of the apartment he had provided, a place that had just started to feel like home, and she walked away, taking with her the two hearts that had become the center of his world. Julian returned to the apartment that evening to a silence that was heavier and colder than any he had ever known. The faint scent of Isabel's vanilla perfume lingered in the air, a cruel reminder of what was gone. He found the letter on the counter, and as he read her neat, careful script, his world tilted on its axis. The pain was sharp and immediate, a physical ache in his chest. It wasn't just the loss of Isabel and Leo. It was the crushing weight of his own failure. He had let the cold, cynical values of his corporate world seep into the one pure, good thing in his life, and it had poisoned it. He had failed to protect her. He had failed Anna all over again. The next few days were a blur of rage and despair. He confronted Davenport, a cold, controlled fury in his eyes. The confrontation was brief and brutal. Davenport was fired, but the victory felt hollow. It didn't bring Isabel back. The foundation felt empty without her. The family she had helped asked after her, their faces etched with concern. He tried to fill her shoes, but he lacked her touch, her innate ability to connect. He was just a man with a checkbook again, and he hated it. Leo was the mirror of his own grief. The little boy retreated into silence, his bright, bubbly energy extinguished. He would sit for hours, staring out the window, clutching a small, hand-drawn picture of him, Isabel, and Julian, labeled My Family. "Is Mama Isabel coming back?" he would ask, his small voice filled with a heartbreaking hope that Julian didn't know how to answer. It was in one of these moments, watching his heartbroken surrogate son, that Julian had his epiphany. Davenport was wrong. Isabel wasn't the liability, his world was. His life of sterile boardrooms, of transactional relationships, of valuing optics over people, that was the cage he had built for himself. Anna hadn't wanted him to be rich. She had wanted him to be happy. And Isabel wasn't a ghost from his past. She was his future. He had to choose. He had to tear down the walls he had so carefully constructed and prove to her, and to himself, what truly mattered. The Anna Project was hosting its first major fundraising gala, an event designed to introduce the foundation to the city's elite. It was the perfect stage. He knew Isabel, wherever she was, would be watching the live stream. A friend of hers from the foundation had promised to send her the link. He threw out the prepared speech, the one filled with corporate jargon and carefully vetted talking points. When he stepped onto the stage, he looked directly into the main camera, as if it were a portal to her. He didn't talk about fundraising goals or 5-year plans. He told them his story. He told them about the foster home, about the lonely boy he had been, and about Anna, the girl whose kindness had been his only light. And then he told them about Isabel. "I met her sister on a rainy night," he said, his voice thick with emotion. "She was at her lowest point, but she still had more strength and integrity than anyone I have ever known. I offered her a job, but she's the one who gave me a life. She taught me that a home is not a place with walls, but a place where you are loved. She and her son healed a part of me I thought was long dead." He paused, taking a shaky breath. "And I, in my fear and my pride, let the judgment of a world that doesn't understand her worth drive her away. That ends tonight." He looked back into the camera, his eyes pleading. "Isabel, Anna's legacy isn't a name on a building. It's the love you show the world every day. It's you. It's Leo. Please, come home." Isabel watched the live stream from a small, borrowed room in a town hundreds of miles away. Her friend had sent the link, insisting she watch. As Julian's words filled the quiet space, tears streamed down her face. Every fear, every insecurity she had harbored was systematically dismantled by his raw, public confession. He wasn't ashamed of her. He was proud of her. He didn't see her as a liability. He saw her as his salvation. She had to go back. She arrived at the gala just as the event was winding down. The ballroom was still filled with elegantly dressed guests, but a hush fell over the room as she walked in, her simple coat and tear-streaked face a stark contrast to the opulence around her. Julian was standing by the stage, talking to a donor, but he saw her immediately. His conversation stopped mid-sentence. He excused himself and walked towards her, his expression a mixture of hope and trepidation. They met in the center of the room, the remaining guests shamelessly watching the real-life drama unfold. "You came," he said, his voice barely a whisper. "You called," she replied, a watery smile on her lips. "I didn't know if you," he started, but she cut him off, placing a hand on his chest. "I heard you, Julian," she said softly. "I heard all of it." In that moment, the noise of the room, the weight of their pasts, the fear of the future, it all melted away. There was only the undeniable truth of their connection. "I love you, Isabel," he said, the words he had been too afraid to say before now tumbling out. "Not because you're like Anna, but because you are you. You are the strongest, kindest person I have ever known." "I love you too," she whispered, the confession both a release and a promise. He then did something that shocked everyone in the room, including her. He dropped to one knee, pulling out a small, unassuming box. He opened it to reveal a simple, delicate ring, a single violet blue sapphire that perfectly matched the color of her eyes. "I know this is fast," he said, his voice shaking slightly, "but I've wasted 20 years living half a life. I don't want to waste another second. I want to build a real home with you and Leo. I want to wake up next to you every morning. Isabel, will you marry me?" She was laughing and crying at the same time, a beautiful, messy combination of joy and relief. "Yes," she said, her voice clear and strong. "Yes, of course, yes." He slid the ring onto her finger, and as the room erupted in spontaneous, heartfelt applause, he stood and kissed her, sealing their promise in front of a world that no longer had the power to judge them. They were not a scandal or a sob story. They were a love story, 20 years in the making, finally finding its beginning. 1 year later, the world looked different. The sleek, cold lines of Julian's former life had been replaced by the warm, chaotic beauty of a family. They were married in the community garden of the Anna Project, surrounded by blooming flowers and the people whose lives they had touched. There were no celebrities, no press, just a joyful mix of board members in suits and neighborhood kids in their Sunday best. Leo, wearing a tiny, slightly crooked bow tie, was the ring bearer, and he took his duty with the utmost seriousness. Their home was not the sterile penthouse, but a comfortable house in a quiet, tree-lined neighborhood. It was a house filled with the smell of Isabel's baking, the sound of Leo's laughter, and the happy clutter of a life well lived. Julian had, as promised, stepped down as chairman of his company, choosing to pour his energy and his heart into running the foundation full-time, side by side with Isabel. He had found that the returns on investing in people were far more valuable than any stock portfolio. One crisp autumn afternoon, the three of them were raking leaves in their backyard. Leo, giggling, jumped into a large pile they had just made, sending a shower of red and gold leaves into the air. Julian and Isabel laughed, their hands finding each other naturally. "You know," Isabel said, leaning her head on his shoulder, "Anna always said that everyone deserves a second chance at a family." Julian looked at his wife, at the love and peace in her eyes, then at the happy, laughing boy who now called him Dad. He pulled them both into a tight hug, his heart overflowing with a gratitude so profound it left him speechless. He had spent a lifetime chasing a phantom of success, only to find that everything he had ever truly wanted had been waiting for him all along, born from a moment of kindness in a forgotten foster home. His life hadn't changed the moment he saw her eyes. It had begun. If the story of Isabel and Julian reminded you that our pasts don't have to define our futures, and that true wealth is measured in love, then you've found a home here at Heart-Wrenching Stories. We tell tales that celebrate the resilience of the human spirit and the transformative power of kindness. To join our community, hit that hype button, subscribe, and turn on notifications so you won't miss our next emotional journey. Let us know in the comments which part of their story touched you the most. Thank you for watching. And remember, sometimes the greatest changes begin with a single act of compassion.